extra warmth. Minutes can seem like eternity when you've woken up in the middle of the night. It only becomes worse when you're cold. That was exactly the position Sonic found himself in the early hours of the morning, huddled as tightly as he could be under his comforter and still shaking. It was very unusual for Sonic to get cold at night. What was more likely was that he'd get too hot and kick his blanket off in his sleep, only occasionally waking up to pull it back over himself again. But tonight, no matter how tightly he wrapped himself, Sonic could simply not get warm. It was exhausting, shivering there for what felt like hours when all his body wanted to do was shut down. His throat hurt, too, like he'd been yelling during a baseball game. Every time he swallowed, it felt like he was scraping the inside of his throat against a rock. Sonic knew he would crash if he could just get warm again. This was the worst. From his new position, Sonic was facing the alarm clock sitting on his new bedside table. The glowing numbers made him squint as he read them. 3 o'clock in the morning. It had been exactly an hour and a half since he'd woken himself up shivering. Was he going to be up all night like this? As he stared past the clock, Sonic could see the entrance to the stairs leading to the bottom floor. For the 30th time since he'd been awake, his thoughts went to the people below. He could imagine Tom and Maddie sleeping peacefully together in their own room downstairs. And once again he wondered if it was worth it to go ask them if there was a way to turn up the heat in his room. And like every other time, his own voice echoed in the back of his mind.
Dude? No way. That would be so rude. They hate it.
Sonic mentally glared at his thoughts.
But Maddie's always told me if I need anything to go get them, right? But you don't even know if they can do anything about it. You're just gonna make them tired, and Tom's gotta go to work tomorrow. That would be so uncool. True.
That's where the conversation had ended 29 times tonight already. Part of Sonic was ready to give in and resort back to huddling, but the other part of him was really sick of being cold.
You're right. I don't want to wake them up, but if I'm up all night and then exhausted tomorrow, I'm just gonna end up having to explain why, and then they might get mad. Or what if I fall asleep in class? Then I'd get in trouble, and that really would be the worst.
There was no mental reply to that argument. Sonic pushed himself up into a sitting position, only to instantly regret it. His head felt like a ton of bricks. He almost lied back down again, except that the path to warmth was down the stairs and around the corner. Sonic wrapped his blanket around himself as tightly as he could. He braced himself for a minute or two, then stood up. The room swayed sharply, and for a moment, Sonic thought he was going to fall over. In the end, though, he managed to just regain his balance and stood up as straight as his tired body would allow. He was still shivering. Moonbeams hit his face through the skylight, and he looked to the stairs. They were only a few feet away from him, but to Sonic's tired mind it seemed like miles. He normally could sprint that distance in a fraction of a second, but right now his legs were shaking with the rest of him. Practically useless. Very, very slowly, Sonic shuffled his way over to the stairs entrance. They were never put away anymore, not since Sonic had moved in. Maddie and Tom had thought it would be nice for the whole house to be more connected, now that someone was living upstairs. Sonic's thoughts briefly drifted to his first memories in this room, back when it was used as an attic filled with dusty boxes. Its conversion to his new cave was a massive improvement. Sonic's feet finally reached the stairway's edge. Now, the challenge was how to climb down. This was not normally a tricky feat, of course, but at that moment when he stood shaking, eyes blurry, the room feeling like it was spinning, that stairway looked more dangerous than jumping off a cliff. Oh, boy! Sonic sat down at the edge of the stairs. Slowly, oh so slowly, he moved himself down onto the step below. Just one step down. Then, gradually, another. Then another. He slid his way down the stairs one by one until he reached the wooden floor. Sonic's body did not want to stand up again, but the cold air forced him to move. It was a good few minutes before Sonic stumbled his way to Tom and Maddie's door. He reached up from under the blankets and fumbled for the knob, finally managing to grab it and twist it to the left. He pushed forward. As the door squeaked open, the dim moonlight in the hallway trickled into the bedroom. Sonic could see Tom and Maddie's sleeping forms on the bed. They were completely still, except for the slight rise and fall of their chest. Seeing them lie there so soundly asleep sent a pit falling into Sonic's stomach. What was he thinking? Waking them up at all hours of the night? How selfish was he? Sonic's feet backed up on their own accord. It didn't matter how cold he was. He could handle it. He couldn't wake them up. He would just make a quick getaway back upstairs before.
Sonic!
Sonic's head snapped up to look into the room and he froze. A confused and blurry-eyed Maddie sat up in bed looking back at him.
What are you doing, sweetie?
He wrapped his blanket tighter around him, suppressing another shiver, and began backing up a few more steps. It hurt to speak, and his voice came out scratchy.
Nothing. I'm really sorry. I shouldn't.
Are you okay?
The question almost startled Sonic. Why was she asking him that when he'd just woken her up in the middle of the night?
Are you having trouble sleeping?
Kind of.
He half shrugged, looking sideways at the floor.
It's just really cold in my room.
Another shiver.
I was just wondering if there was a way to maybe make it warmer.
Maddie smiled slightly as she brought a hand up to rub her eyes.
Sure thing, sweetie. Give me a minute.
She slipped her feet out from under the covers and into the pink fuzzy slippers by her bed.
I'll get you an extra blanket.
What's up?
Tom was now pushing himself upright, blinking and looking even more tired than Maddie. Sonic wanted to disappear into his comforter.
Nothing, I'm just getting an extra blanket for Sonic. He says it's cold upstairs.
Oh, really? That's weird. That room's always hot.
Tom squeezed his eyes shut, grunting as he swung his legs out of the bed.
Maybe there's a weird window open somewhere and worrying I'll get the blanket.
Before Maddie could protest, Tom was already up and heading towards the door. He ruffled Sonic's quills as he walked past, and Sonic watched him leave. Guilt still ate away at his insides as he heard Tom yawn while opening the hall closet. But even he had to admit, an extra blanket sounded wonderful. Maddie smirked a little, looking at Sonic.
Yes, that's that, then.
She pushed the covers off fully and stood.
How about you and I head back on upstairs and see if we can figure out if one of the windows is open?
Sonic nodded and clung to his blanket a little tighter.
Okay.
He could feel his body heat spiking and dropping in waves. Now, like strokes of hot and cold running up and down his spine, Maddie passed him, and he followed. By the time he made it around the corner, she was already waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs. Her stance to the side made clear that she expected him to go up first. That's what always happened. Sonic looked up at the stairway, which seemed to be taller than Mount Everest. He eventually lifted a foot onto the bottom step and forced himself to grab the banister on the right. It took all his strength to pull himself up that one step. Maddie watched Sonic as he hesitated. It was unlike him, even when tired, to take more than a few seconds to make it to the top. She bit her lip as she saw him struggle to pull himself up. The question was out before she could filter it.
Would you like a lift?
Why did she ask that? It wasn't that she didn't want to carry Sonic. Quite the opposite. Actually, it was just that that question was exactly the kind of thing that would embarrass him. She waited for him to blush, or quickly remind her that no, he was a baby and was perfectly capable of walking up the stairs himself. Thank you very much. However, none of those reactions came. Instead, Sonic's eyes looked relieved.
Okay.
He murmured. Maddie didn't know what to think of that, but she reached down for him. She carefully scooped Sonic up, meeting no resistance, and leaned his body against her torso. The boy's head flopped against her left shoulder. As Maddie walked up the stairs with the hedgehog, something made her mentally pause. Was it just her imagination, or could she feel him trembling under the blanket? Maddie quickly made her way to the edge of Sonic's bed, where she sat down and pulled the hedgehog away from her shoulder. Sonic flinched, gripping his blanket tighter.
Sorry, sweetie. I just got to check something.
Unlike when he was backlit in their bedroom doorway, the moonlight in the attic allowed Maddie to see Sonic much clearer. His eyebrows were furrowed in a sort of subconscious, pained expression. Maddie reached up a hand to the boy who was indeed shaking. She could now tell for sure, and gently placed her fingers on his cheeks and forehead. Sonic winced slightly at the touch. Maddie sucked in her breath through her teeth. Just what she feared. Sonic's face was hot, much hotter than normal. The light in the room made it unclear, but Maddie was sure if she flicked on his lump, she'd see Sonic's cheeks flushed with fever.
Oh, Sonic?
Maddie brought the boy back in close, still feeling him tremble as he leaned against her.
You poor thing.
Just then, Tom's head came up through the floor. He held up a dark bundle.
I found it in a blanket.
He smirked in amusement as he reached the top of the stairs and saw Sonic.
Asleep again, waiting out.
Maddie didn't return his smile.
No, Tom, I think Sonic's sick.
Tom's smile disappeared instantly.
Really?
He moved to the side of the bed and sat down by Maddie, now studying Sonic with intensity.
What do you think he's got?
I don't know, but he has a fever.
Tom's hand instinctively went to feel Sonic's forehead. As always in these kinds of situations, his wife was right. Sonic's face burned, his features scrunched up in discomfort. Tom could even feel the boy shaking slightly beneath his fingertips. Something in his heart wrenched.
Look, kid, Sonic, can you hear me?
Sonic groaned lightly, and his eyes cracked open, eventually finding Tom. He blinked slowly, as if struggling to focus.
Hey, buddy.
Tom gave him a sympathetic smile.
Sonic, how I'm feeling right now.
Sonic's eyebrows clenched harder as he tried to clear his throat. It was a pitiful attempt that produced little results.
Awful.
Sonic croaked out.
I feel like I've been running around the world non-stop where you're in the snow.
He suppressed another shiver, leaning his head back slightly to address Maddie.
Am I really sick?
Maddie gave him a smile, though worry tainted it.
I think so, honey. You've definitely got a temperature.
She gently caressed the fur on his face with her thumb, and Sonic unknowingly leaned into it. It was not unlike the way another parent might brush away a loose hair from their child's cheek.
How about we put you back in bed with the extra blanket? We'll get you a little warmer, and you can go back to sleep.
Sleep? That sounds nice.
Sonic mumbled. It took a minute for Maddie to get herself to stand and put Sonic down in his bed. Tom was ready with the blanket, and together they tucked the hedgehog in, bundling Sonic up as tightly as they could. Even as he curled into himself, he mumbled and exhausted.
Thanks.
Maddie sat on the bed's edge again, running her hand gently over Sonic's head quills. Tom stood at the bed's opposite side, and they stayed there, unmoving, for who knows how long. Eventually, Sonic fell back into fitful sleep. Tom whispered to Maddie.
Is there anything we can give him?
Maddie looked up at her husband. His arms were crossed, eyebrows furrowed, mouth tight. She sighed.
I don't want to risk it. Not yet, at least. We know so little about the way his body works.
Her eyes traveled back down to their boy.
I'm worried anything we give him might just make him worse.
Tom dipped his head, a defeated sigh escaping through his nose.
All right.
So that meant he could do nothing. Maybe it came with being sheriff, or maybe it was part of their new family dynamic. But Tom hated this feeling, being helpless when someone he cared about needed him. A few moments later, Maddie whispered to him.
Do you think we should stay?
Tom met Maddie's eyes. He could see the worry in them, but it wasn't the same look she sometimes had when in the vet's office. No, this was something else. This was the concern of a new parent.
I'll be honest, I don't really want to go.
Me neither.
Maddie stood then and made her way to the stairs.
So I'll go grab our blanket.
As his wife disappeared downstairs, Tom slowly walked around to the other side of the bed and sat down on its edge. Sonic whimpered something in his sleep. Stirring slightly, Tom reached over, like Maddie had, and gently stroked his top wills.
It's gonna be okay, bud. You're here, he'll be all right.
He found himself whispering to him. The stairs creaked behind Tom as Maddie returned with their own comforter, which she dropped it on the floor in a heap before moving to Sonic's side. She held something in her hand, and Tom realized it was the digital no-contact thermometer from their first aid kit. Maddie knelt and held the machine up to Sonic's forehead until it beeped. As she glanced at the screen.
102 degrees.
What does that mean?
Well, it definitely means a fever, but it's not too bad yet.
She put the thermometer down on Sonic's bedside table.
104 is when you were supposed to call a doctor.
Tom released a small sigh.
Okay, so what now?
Maddie's lips pressed together as she looked at Sonic.
Wait until morning. If he's any worse, I'll figure out something to give him.
Tom nodded. They stood there a minute, just watching him. Then in almost the same moment, they both moved to pick up their comforter. Silently they settled down onto Sonic's old patched-up beanbag. the blanket draped over them. Tom put his arm around Maddie as she leaned into his side. They both stared through the skylight above them. The Milky Way was clear tonight, and you could see its stripe across the sky.
He'll be all right.
Maddie glanced at her husband. His gaze was fixed above them. His statement almost sounded like he was trying to convince himself.
Of course he will.
Maddie whispered back. They lay there a while, sleep slow in coming. Every now and again they heard the rustle of Sonic's sheets. He didn't wake up again, however, and that was at least a small comfort. All they could do now was wait.